And before you begin, Lloyd, I'd also like to know that in the chat, I'm going to presentation so that anyone can then be able to reach it online. I was able to do that while we were having this conversation. And also, I'd like to invite anyone that so chooses to actually go to SlideShare where this presentation is presented, and you'll be able to download it for your own further purposes. Thank you. Back to you, Lloyd.
So absolutely, I will also be putting my own presentation. I would like to do that this week as well, because there are some additional things that I've been adding to my own presentation that I do, the standard presentation that I've been doing for so many weeks. So I want to thank you again, Patrick. If you need to drop off our call because of connection issues, whether the costs for you to be on with us today, but I do want to thank you very much for that excellent presentation. Unfortunately,
I wouldn't want Patrick to leave till I speak because I'm so moved.
Okay, go ahead, Stephanie. Actually, we'll have a discussion first before we go ahead with any other
sorry to interrupt, but Patrick and everybody, I'm Stephanie Schuler, based in Toronto, Canada, and I'm in my final year of my doctoral studies. And this too is my mission. We have the same mission. And if the only reason I was on UnityNet International, Unity Learning and Unity Eco Village, it's for this reason alone would be enough. My doctorate is about looking at the experience of having learning disabilities in school, which represents 20% of the population globally. And learning disabilities is only one part of the disabled labels that society has constructed. And the biggest issue, I totally agree with you, and your presentation was so succinct and excellent, is the stigma that it can create when we are pointing out people, excluding people, the self-esteem issues, the social capital issues, being lonely, and often being put into other environments that aren't inclusive, that are not with their peers, for social and emotional and for learning purposes. And as you pointed out, in many places, these kids go on to dropping out of high school and often getting in trouble with the law and whatnot, and go into adulthood facing many struggles, internal and externally. So that is crucial to me. That's why we're trying to create Maui Aloha Project. Eco Village Initiative is for sure about climate action and housing and food security, but it's also about inclusive communities that celebrate all people's strengths and weaknesses, and have a way of learning that goes from the child, rather than the same expectations worldwide. It's too steep for everybody. So Patrick, I just want to thank you, and that your presentation should be seen around the world, and I'd like to somehow include it in my dissertation, but we really need a shift to include, and it's called inclusive design. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Almost welcome. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Stephanie. I think what we need to do, I was about to say, it's too bad that Lisa Anise isn't on our call, because I did want to mention as well that I did do a presentation about the potential for using some of these solutions, such as the solar roof.
And Lloyd, if you could show your video, we are streaming.
Oh yes, sorry.
Thank you.
Didn't realize I'm not going here. So I wanted to mention as well that I did a presentation, I guess it was, I'm not sure if it was earlier this year or even last year, about the possibility of leveraging some of these, what we call regenerative infrastructure solutions to actually create spaces in our communities that are habitats for humans, but also habitats for all our relations, so other animals, other living beings who can live together and learn together, but it can also create accessibility options for many people who are challenged with disabilities. And I think that is something that I really would love to incorporate into our local projects here, especially as we have conversations with the city of Markham and those transit hubs and the projects that the region of York would like to do. So if we can take a really strong lens on accessibility for the transit stations and systems, there is a strong push, of course, as well for automation, end-to-end mobility options for all people. And I think that is something that if we can partner as well with communities in Africa, the city of Los Angeles, which of course is going to be building this type of infrastructure for the Olympics that are coming up in a few years. So we can integrate all of these solutions and demonstrate them in multiple countries across our networks. This is where we can really, I think, engage with those members of the UN Global Compact, engage with the members of the UN itself, and governments that are members and want to achieve those sustainable development goals, hopefully in record time.
If I may be so kind, in the chat, I've also put a link there to our AHIABGA Facebook page, our About Us section, in that we address the 17 Sustainable Development Goals for people with disabilities. So I want to make it very clear that there are right now resources that will fully engage to leave no one behind. And specifically, if you'll, I'll put the link in the chat, but when you go here, you'll find that it's called Envision 2030, 17 Goals to Transform the World for Persons with Disabilities. But on this page, you have, of course, 17 Sustainable Development Goals. But one thing that Patrick mentioned is the need for education. We have an unrivaled opportunity now to take advantage of free educational resources that are publicly available to anyone in the world that has an internet connection. And each of these 17 Sustainable Development Goals here have a link to a but in this case, it does list policy breaches and infographics. It lists events with October 17th recently passed being the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. But it also has the targets for each of the goals. Further, there's also for example, and poverty. There's a strong directional link between poverty and disability. Poverty may cause disability through malnutrition, poor health care, and dangerous living conditions. Case studies in developing countries show that the higher disability rates are associated with higher rates of illiteracy, poor nutritional status, lower immunization coverage, lower birth weight, higher rates of unemployment and underemployment, and lower occupational mobility. Disability can cause poverty by preventing the full participation of persons with disabilities, especially if the appropriate supports and accommodations are not available. So Lloyd, that's why I wanted to bring your attention, and Stephanie, to the work that you've been doing with UNET, which stands for, in our case, UnityNet Africa and Diaspora, and taking this cause on to be able to lead us into the rest of this decade to deliver action on the Sustainable Development Goals. So in that regard, as I said, this is a link that shows SDG number 1, and it has resources here, strategies. For example, I'll just click one. This is the power strategies.
Oops, unfortunately.
Well, there it goes. You just have to click through. Technology is only great when it works, Lloyd. So here are ways to ensure that persons that access a person with disabilities to decent and productive work is part of the process. I won't take us through all of these, but I did put the link in the chat so that any of you or anyone listening can access this information. And Stephanie, I'd like to talk to you and Lloyd about ways we can embed this into our efforts going forward, because as Lloyd mentioned, we here are actually in 2028 going to be hosting the Paralympics, but we have the Paris Olympics coming up first. So today is the day we need to start to move towards our objectives for the rest of the decade. Count me in on that regard. Back to you, Lloyd.
Thank you, Andrew. It is extremely important, I think, especially we do as well have and this was another reason for creating the Bubble Fund Sports, as the suggestion, of course, was to develop a side event for these Olympic Games, so we can really engage, hopefully, with the Olympic Committee and have some community events that can involve all people in these engagement activities. So think about August, those dates in August that we'd like to do these Bubble Fun events. So those Bubble Fun festivals, sports, arts, and cultural events that we will engage all people, all families at every level. No matter where we are, we can do these. And then looking at the Paris Olympics, and there is a great segue in terms of the Paris Olympics being, of course, in France, and our own connection to the 4 per 1,000 initiative, which again was created by the government of France. So as we talk about climate change mitigation and these climate smart solutions, how can we create a dialogue, for instance, with 4 per 1,000 initiative about some of the other types of solutions that we're also promoting, like the regenerative agriculture, the regenerative forests, the biochar programs that they're actually already spearheading as well.
Well, before we get off the topic of today's subject, and I would also like to call you to account, Lloyd, as the representative of the Francophone countries, to understand that France is, of course, the head of the Francophone countries. So I'm encouraging you to think about this as your timeline to connect together what we're doing for the upcoming Paris Olympics to what we're doing here in Los Angeles, and start now and not later. But I did notice that Heinrich has his video open, so perhaps Heinrich, you'd like to introduce yourself, and if there are any comments about today's presentation, please put it in the chat or raise your hand. But before you do your presentation, Lloyd, perhaps we could have the guests here introduce themselves. I see a few people are new to me, so perhaps.
If you wish to unmute yourself and say a few words, Heinrich.
Okay, good evening from Heinrich van der Merwe from UnityNet South Africa in Van der Bijl Park in Gauteng province in South Africa. I think one of the biggest issues for disabled people, especially people that is wheelchair bound in Africa, is that there is not always proper facilities, for them to use the facilities and so forth. In South Africa, we've designed now a new generation wheelchairs where the wheelchair become everything that a disabled person needs. And we've always said that through innovation we need to come up with solutions for Africa. And I believe that there are several institutions in South Africa that's really making headways now with customizing wheelchairs that will be to a great benefit for people in Africa, and also for use, people that want to do a little bit more manual type of work, but you need a sturdy wheelchair to achieve that. I would like to liaise with Patrick and give him this information of the institutions in South Africa that he can approach and people that he can talk to around that specific topic. Some other things that I've learned in the past weeks is that there's countries like Ireland that is growing so rapidly now that they're running out of people to train, people to support the economy and so forth. And there's a lot of emphasis in the world on the type of skilled person that we need today. In the old days, we've concentrated on especially engineers to prepare the guys for the hard and harsh realities of engineering, but never did anything to train these people with the soft skills. And there's definitely now movement to train people not only on the technical side, but also on the soft skill side, the HR and all those elements, which is a total new outlook on training. I think that if the one thing is true, that we in Africa can concentrate on disruptive technologies to get ourselves going. And why do I say so? If you look at the world, the supply chain is in chaos. People can't expect to get the goods that was coming in regularly by ship from China or anywhere as they used to do in the past. And many of the countries have lost the ability to supply themselves with these commodities and components and devices that they require. And the same applies for food. The food supply chain is not what it's supposed to be. We've got a 120 days window again to get grain from the Ukraine. What then? So I believe that we need to look at rapidly introducing small-scale irrigation systems in Africa, where people can bump up the yield and start feeding themselves, because the truck with the GMO grain and maize and whatever is not going to arrive in the near future. But this offers the opportunity to get things going. We've got all these big lakes in Africa that must be ideal for wind electricity generation. It's out of the way, it's safe, and none of these lakes are so deep that it's not practical to put up these wind turbines. But we will have to look at the opportunities that is rearing its head now, and establish the businesses around these opportunities that will be sustainable and will take Africa, especially the poorer nations in Africa, to the next level of production and processing of foods and goods. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. There were many things there, of course, in your short talk there. I tried to capture them in the chat as well, so we have a record of what you have said in writing. But I think it is really important as well what you said about the fact that we do need to create these local businesses, establish these businesses, hopefully as humanitarian enterprises in our local communities. And that is a big part of what we have been trying to do, defining what it is, what it means, how to move forward, and creating the backbone of professionals who will assist these young people, especially with understanding how to create these local community-based businesses so that can actually deploy these solutions in their local communities.
On another very interesting aspect in South Africa is hydrogen generation. We are going to invest in the next years 8.5 billion American dollars in green hydrogen, and you know, people that can come up with the application, the end-use technology, is going to be the people that is going to generate the future incomes. And you know, catalytic converters and stuff for fuel cells and those type of things. People must start looking at those type of technologies, because we are sitting now with fuel cell technology that's advancing so fast that the kilowatt per kilogram output is so that they are successfully installed into aeroplanes. And you know, this is the type of alternative clean energy that we need to deploy in Africa. And the fact that such a vast amount of money is going to be invested in generating hydrogen, we need to find out how can we, the poor communities, capitalize on these opportunities. One thing that we must remember, that Europe don't have young people. Their fertility rate is negative. They are not growing. And suddenly they are stealing. Well, stealing is probably not the right international term, but they are luring our young people to Europe to fill those gaps. And we need to come up with opportunities where we are offering these services on the continent to the European companies without moving our people away from the continent again. We need to be we need to come up with new solutions. The old thermal power stations in South Africa are failing one after another. We've got rolling blackouts. So the future is going to be in the hands of the smaller communities. More and more smaller communities are taking responsibility for their own sustainability, for their own destiny. And we need that, build that into the template that we are busy working on for community development, to be really self-sustainable. And people, you know me well, we need to look at the livability factors. The people with the disabilities, the old people, the children, need to be part of our plans. But we can't only plan and talk about disabilities and talk about all the bad things that's happening. We need to, on the other side, put a lot of emphasis on making things happen so that people can create the means to help themselves, their people, and their whole community. Thank you.
In that regard, Stephanie, if you could reach us, and Lloyd, what I want you as co-founders of UnityNet, to address something that Patrick mentioned. Education has to be the first step in engaging the world. But Heinrich has demonstrated to us, since he's been attending almost each of these 76 weekly sessions, is that he's committed to having outcomes. I'm suggesting that we are in a unique position because the UnityNet you created engages people at the grassroots, like Patrick, as well as people at the top of the line, like Heinrich. But Stephanie and Lloyd and I have to take what we have now and move us forward. So, for example, Heinrich, I'm working with a team now that includes someone in Canada who is working with someone in Armenia that's developed a hydrogen solution that could, in fact, redirect some of those billions of dollars that South Africa has committed to green hydrogen to the actual hydrogen generation from the water surrounding South Africa as well. But what that means to our disabled community worldwide is that we have to get them engaged now with this transition, because otherwise they'll continue to be on the menu and not at the table. So Stephanie and Lloyd, I'd like to ask if you and I, Heinrich, perhaps, could at least form a WhatsApp group to determine how we can move our so far collaboration into activation. So that's my request to both of all of you.
Well, I think one of the things that we've stated in the past is that the cell phone plays enormous role in Africa. And we've quoted figures and so forth and so forth. The interesting thing that I've also learned in the past weeks is that satellite technology is not that accessible that it used to be in the past. You know, people can send up their own satellites. I've met a guy that is in the, I was sitting next to a guy that called himself a rocket scientist. The first ever in my life that I was sitting next to a rocket scientist. You know, we always refer to somebody that they are not rocket scientists, but I've met a real life rocket scientist, and he said to us, you know, he came from Germany, and he said he arrived 10 years ago in South Africa with only the clothes on his back, and he is running a multi-billion rand or $100 million enterprise now in South Africa, building rockets and satellites and that. One of our universities of technology, Stephen Bosman, is in charge of a program, and they are sending up, they are building and sending up satellites like you can't believe. And I know, Andrew, that you know, one envisage, you know, to improve community communication, but you know, with the right satellite system, you can actually replace the dependency on you know, international cell phone networks, and communities can have their own cell phone network and keep that money that goes, I don't know where today, in their own community by having their own satellite. So yeah, things are changing so rapidly, and we need, our thinking need to be 10-15 years ahead of time, so that people invest in the right foundations and the right education, so that we can have the right people in place for this type of development that is taking place. And you know, we don't want to be left behind by the big guys again, controlling everything, where there's an opportunity for us to also have a finger in the pie. Thank you.
In that regard, Heinrich and Lloyd, I'd like to bring your attention to something that has not yet been discussed, that I haven't heard being discussed in any of these groups. And that's the fact that there are an existing plan for the continent called the Agenda 2063. In that regard, there are 12 flagship projects to deal with the continent of Africa. But what's lesser known is that there are 5 diaspora legacy projects. That would involve people of the kinds, Heinrich, that you're discussing, because this involves not just people that were born on the ground, but also people that have come into these various countries, but also people from those countries. For example, few people are aware that Elon Musk himself is from South Africa. So he technically is part of our extended diaspora family from South Africa. But on the screen, I put the flagship project number 11, an outer space strategy that would allow Africa to strengthen Africa's use of outer space to bolster this technology. So, as it says, outer space is of critical importance to the development of Africa in all fields: agriculture, disaster management, remote sensing, climate forecast, banking and finance, defense and security. What Heinrich is discussing is a methodology that would empower the local communities there to become engaged in a hyper-local way, so that we can then begin to aggregate the successes that we have throughout South Africa and throughout the world, but only if we self-educate about what existing plans and resources there are. So I'm going to put a link to the chat, a link in the chat about these flagship projects. And I would like to ask Lloyd if Stephanie and you, again, perhaps with me or in a WhatsApp group, discuss the overarching macro impact of what you're doing with UnityNet Africa. This was the intent, my intent in the first place, to allow us to understand what's already happening and find ways to connect that to our local activities. So with that, Lloyd, I'll turn it back to you. And Stephanie, I'd like to know if I can get your commitment to work with Heinrich and me to engage the universities to be the bridge between our civil society activities and the commercial enterprises as we go forward. What I perhaps mentioned before is that my RTC Export Trading Company actually has already set up a infrastructure to support your efforts. So I'll turn it back to you now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I have mentioned as well that we should be having conversations with yourself, because this is very much in alignment with what you've initially set up through the Ad Hoc International Advisory Board of Goodwill Ambassadors, which we are, of course, leveraging the network that you had originally created in order to establish. And this network was, UnityNet was originally created to support this process of globalization that we are now moving forward to implement. Another thing I was thinking of as you were talking, both yourself and Hendrik as well, was around this idea that we had talked about early on, I believe even last year, where the first concept that we had started discussing was how Africa has an opportunity to leapfrog its development. And I think these are the opportunities we're now discovering, where the African continent is able to leapfrog over many of these legacy infrastructure solutions that we're currently using here in the West to these new and disruptive solutions. And I think that's where we really need to focus our efforts. I agree with Heinrich in that case. Distributed energy, the distributed internet, the microgrids, the solutions that will allow that self-sufficiency to happen, but only if the people on the ground are not just aware of what they are, but also skilled in actually building them, deploying them, maintaining them, and being able to utilize them efficiently and effectively, which means there's a lot of learning that needs to happen. We're building the backbone here, I think, for that framework for distribution of the education to these local communities. We aren't coming up with those solutions ourselves. We're not coming up with the education and training programs, because those exist out there, again, with the universities and colleges and schools and even the companies, corporations who have those solutions within their pocket, and they're ready to roll them out, but just need to be able to train people on the ground in these communities and in how to actually get them deployed and operational. So this is, I think, a big part of our task moving forward. So did we want to actually, I'm looking at the clock now. I do need to be off the call early today. I probably have an hour or so. Do we want?
Well, I think I'm the ball's in your court, Lloyd. I have to leave myself, but I'll make you host. But I'm done for the day. But I'll turn it over to you. You can go as long as you need to.
So maybe what we'll do is I said before we started that I do have a number of different things that I added to the slides. But this week we've already been on for about an hour and a half. We've done it in a couple sections already. It's not a priority, let's say, to have the regular presentation today. We'll likely adding more as we move forward. Not more slides, just more information into these regular presentations. But
then it sounds like you're going to give us the rest of our day today.
Yeah, I need to get some work done. I have a whole list of things I need to be doing. I didn't do everything I needed to be done yesterday. I do, of course, we want to create some more discussion groups focused around these different topics that even just came up today. One thing I was almost trying to remember as well, and I'd like to connect you, especially Andrew and others so are on this call. So the gentleman that I just started UnityNet Gambia yesterday with. He was also a member of our UnityNet group for people with disabilities because he is blind. And so this gentleman in the Gambia is somebody I think we should also have a discussion with as well.
So why don't you set up a WhatsApp group now?
Consider that.
If you set up a if you set up a WhatsApp group today, right now, I'll do that, Lloyd. Ball's in your court.
Oh, you're muted there, Andrew.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, if you set up a WhatsApp group now, Lloyd, I'll follow up now. That ball's in your court.
Yep. No, so we'll have an introduction as well, or I'll send you the link to join the brand new UnityNet, the Gambia group that
Excellent.
I just created with this one gentleman. So it's just himself, myself right now in that group.
Good.
And
I'll
we can
also invite Sharif Al-Bey, who's from the Gambia, and we're working on a regular daily basis. So I'll add him to the group whenever you get ready. Ball's in your court.
So I was excited to hear that we had a member of the UnityNet from the Gambia. So who's not just with AHIABGA, so he's actually there, and we can now have a conversation with them as well.
Yes. I'm going to wind it up.
All right.
Well, good night then. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all, and
we'll see you next week.
We'll follow up with you later. Thank you so much.
Good night, all.
Good night. Technology.
Thanks, everybody.
Love
Thank
you,
you.
Stephanie. Talk to you soon.
Love you too.